Welcome to Stories, Science and Secrets, Episode 4, and the fourth part of Rockford's Rock Opera's musical story, Lost on Infinity. If you haven't heard the first 3 episodes, you need to go back and hear them now. But for the rest of us, if you're sitting comfortably, then we'll begin. Rockford the dog has been checked into Infinity by mistake. Meanwhile, back in Battersea Park, Moog and his uncle are searching desperately for their missing dog.
Come on, Rockford. Rockford.
Far away in Battersea Park, Moog and his uncle were still looking for Rockford.
Oh, no, your mum will kill me.
Said Moog's uncle.
Rockford, come on, boy.
They split up to search, and as it began to snow, their 2 lonely figures called out in the gathering dusk.
As the night is falling, a lonely cry is ringing out the day. All alone and it's dawning, that happy times have left and gone astray today. Far away is he calling, a lonely heart all lost and gone away. So he'll search till the morning. Will happiness return at break of day today? What did he do? Did he run away? But where will he go? And how far will he stray? Lost on the road on a winter night, giving up the ghost and giving up the fight. It's true, but I don't believe this tale's already through. So he'll keep on calling till his time is due, and he'll keep on walking 'cause this tale is true. It's true. It's true.
Moog had been searching for some time, when down the path he saw a familiar sight. Pulling on his blue Battersea dog's home lead was one of Rockford's friends, Jarvis the Spaniel, and behind him was a dog walker from Battersea Dog's home.
You haven't seen Rockford, have you?
Asked Moog.
He was sniffing around by the boat.
Said the dog walker.
Shall we have a look?
And with renewed hope, Moog ran back towards the lake. Down by the water, all was quiet. A single yellow light illuminated the still surface, where there bobbed a row of small pleasure boats moored up for the winter. Moog was just about to turn back, when out of the corner of his eye, he saw a movement on board one of them.
Rockford?
Moog stepped carefully onto the boat. It was a strange craft, unlike any of the others, made in the shape of a leaf. But as Moog stepped on board, instead of just bobbing up and down and tugging at its ropes, the little boat started to drift out into the lake. Moog was too busy searching to notice the gentle movement as he peered down into the boat.
Rockford?
He whispered. But instead of Rockford jumping up to welcome him, all Moog saw was a small, unremarkable-looking green moth fluttering up into the light. Just then, he heard a cry from the lakeside, which, looking up, he realised was now some distance away. It was the dog walker who was standing on the bank and shouting. But he wasn't shouting to Moog. He was staring at his dog, who was standing next to him on the bank, and he was calling his name. And as Moog watched, he could see why. The dog was disappearing. In front of his eyes, it was melting away into thin air. It was like it was being rubbed out. First his tail, and his back legs, then his shoulders and his head, and finally his nose. Soon, Jarvis the dog had vanished completely.
Jarvis?
What the dog walker couldn't have known, what nobody on earth could have known, was that just a second before, far away on the island of infinity, Rockford had been checked in by the registrar. Dogs were now extinct, and one by one they were vanishing from Earth, starting here by the lake in Battersea Park. Moog looked on in amazement. He had never seen anything so strange, until just a few seconds later, when the green moth that was still fluttering above his head started to talk. It wasn't clear what it was saying at first. Occasional words mixed with a purring flapping of wings, but as Moog concentrated and the boat drifted further out into the lake, the anonymous moth fixed him with its feathery antennae and said,
I can't see why the world won't see. I am green, but my nose is clean. I used to dream that I had secrets for us. It's not to be, for this anonymous moth is lost. One day soon the world will wake up fully. What's the world to do? No one left for calling. One day soon the world will wake up high and dry. And then they'll miss me. The truth was in me, but all the world was blind. They won't see that I hold the key, and those dreams will remain undreamed.
So with the dog walker left on the snowy lakeside, staring blankly at the place where his dog had vanished, and with more and more worried calls beginning to echo around Battersea Park, a bewildered boy and an anonymous moth drifted out into the lake.
We need anonymous moths
and disappeared.
What's the world to do? No one left for calling. One day soon the world will wake up high and dry. And then they'll miss me. The truth was in me, but all the world was blind. I am green, but the world won't see.
It's such a shame. I thought I had something to offer. A moth of destiny. A significant species. But it doesn't look like it now. Oh, what a pity.
And so another lonely creature now found itself drifting under a swirling sky towards the island of infinity and its home among the world's extinct animals. Only this time, there was a human being there, too.
Goodness, with the anonymous moth and a human on their way to infinity, and dogs disappearing into thin air, what on earth will happen next? To find out, you'll need to listen to Stories, Science and Secrets, Episode 5. But now it's Science and Secrets time with me, Elaine, Steve,
Hello.
and Matthew. Yeah. But first, because we're back there in the snow, we're going to tell you a little bit more about Battersea Park.
Battersea Park is a famous Victorian park on the south bank of the River Thames, next to Chelsea Bridge and overlooked by Battersea Power Station.
The park was first opened way back in 1858, in a place where a few years before the Duke of Wellington, as in Wellington Boots and the Battle of Waterloo, and the Earl of Winchelsea had met for an infamous pistols at dawn duel.
Duels were the way posh gentlemen used to sort out their disagreements in a civilised way, by standing in a field and shooting each other. You, sir, you have offended the honour of my waterproof footwear, and now you must die.
In the case of the Duke and the Earl, they both missed and decided to go home.
Then, a few years later, Battersea Park hosted the very first football match, played under the new Football Association, or FA, soccer rules, the start of organised football in Great Britain and around the world. Although the rules were a little different to how they are today.
You, sir, you have scored from an offside position, and now you must die.
Fast forward through 2 world wars, when the park was used as a base for anti-aircraft guns and secret military planning. And to today.
Battersea Park has loads of things to see, including a children's zoo, the Pear Tree Cafe by the lake where Rockford disappears and where you can take a boat out in the summer. There are playing fields, trees, plants and wildlife to see, plus of course lots of dogs on their walks, many from Battersea Dogs and Cats Home, which is just around the corner.
One final thing you really ought to have a look at if you're in Battersea Park is the Peace Pagoda, which is a beautiful, tall Japanese tower. With statues and covered in gold, it's looked after by a Buddhist monk who lives in the park. And it's one of 80 pagodas built around the world as part of a campaign for world peace and non-violence.
Pity it wasn't there when the Duke of Wellington and the Earl of Winchelsea were around.
You, sir, you have offended the honour of my waterproof footwear, so now we must hug.
And now we're really happy to welcome a very special guest to Story, Science and Secrets. Someone brilliantly qualified to tell us lots more about the creature we've just met that's now on its way to infinity with Moog.
I'm David Lees, and I'm a senior curator at the Natural History Museum, and I curate micro-moths.
So, David, in our story, we've just met an anonymous moth. So, obviously, you'd like to ask, are there such things as anonymous moths?
Yes, in fact, we've got thousands of anonymous moths just sitting in drawers at the Natural History Museum, and one of our jobs is actually to name them.
So we're obviously talking to the right man.
Yes, to understand and communicate about moths, we have to find names for them. In fact, today we're announcing the naming of a new moth, the mysterious moth that turned up in Spain.
And had never been found before?
Yes, that's right. We had to go through something like over 1,000 species of moths to make sure that it hadn't already been described by someone. We now have a specimen sitting in the museum with a neat red label underneath it, and it bears the name of Xenotorador digioxanthus. And that doesn't really roll off the tongue, but that's its new name.
Can you tell us some of the reasons why moths are important?
Moths are a really important part of the ecosystem. A lot of people would think moths are maybe a bad thing, and all they ever seem to find when they open the wardrobe is some woolens that look like Swiss cheese in there. But in fact, moths, they support a whole ecosystem of other insects, and they breed an army of munching caterpillars. And by eating leaves, an army of caterpillars keep dominant plants in check. So they actually do a good job in promoting the diversity, for example, of the rainforests. But there's another thing, which is that they are very important as pollinators. Now, with pollination, I think the first thing people think about is bumblebees or honeybees. And indeed, they're really important. But moths, they tend to fly at night, and so people don't really see what they're up to. The moths are unsung heroes, you know, no one sings about them.
We do.
No one prints their patterns on summer dresses, and yet they're really important for the ecosystem.
So with all this in mind and all these anonymous moths turning up, how many species of moth do you think there are in the UK and how many worldwide?
Well, in the last checklist in the UK, we had 2,217 resident species of moths, as opposed to a measly 59 resident species of butterflies. But in the world, we have 142,606 species, as opposed to 18,539 butterflies. So moths far outnumber butterflies. Just to put it in context, moths are actually about 7% of all biodiversity that we know about in terms of species. So they're really important.
We talk in the story about biomimicry, and we were wondering if there were any examples of inventions or products that humans have made as a result of studying moths.
Well, yes, there are actually several. This idea of biomimicry is being explored by a professor at Bristol University called Mark Holderoyd, and he is thinking of making a kind of soundproofing tile based on stealth cloaks of moths. Now, what are stealth cloaks of moths? Well, you probably have seen that moths are actually quite furry, and they often have quite dense scales on the wings as well. And it turns out that those scales are not just to provide woolly coats for them at night when it's a bit cold. They're actually to muffle the sound and makes it very difficult for the bat sonar to really target onto the moth when it's flying. And another thing, you may have heard of the humble moth called the greater waxworm. It actually tends to feed inside wasp and bee nests, but it turns out that it can actually eat plastic. This moth eats its way out of plastic bags. A technician just discovered this by chance working in the lab, but it turns out that there could be a major discovery here in terms of the enzymes that the wax moths use to break down wax in the beehive. They can also use to break down plastic bags. So, fancy that.
And we really wanted to ask, do you have a favourite species of moth?
I think the harpoon moth. This is a moth which actually feeds on the tears of sleeping birds.
Wow.
This was observed by some bird watchers in western Madagascar, and they saw these giant moths sitting on the backs of birds at night. And looking in detail, they could see its proboscis inserted into the blinking membranes of the bird's eye. And so we published a paper on that. Yeah, it caused quite a lot of excitement, actually. People afraid to sleep out at night in Madagascar and that kind of thing. But, yeah.
What, are people who cry at night, presumably? They're the ones who are mainly in danger.
Exactly. I've got another favourite if you want it.
Oh, yeah, we like the favourites.
It's called Macrocylix maya, and it lives in Southeast Asia. And this moth is a real one for art fanatics because it depicts on its wings a disgusting scene of a red-eyed fly feeding on vomit and bird poo.
Yes, please.
And it even smells disgusting. It smells of urea, this moth.
Right.
We should have had one of those in the story.
I've got to look this up, really. Fantastic. If children or adults want to encourage moths, probably butterflies too, but is there anything they can do in their garden?
Very best thing to do if you're lucky enough to have a garden is actually to plant seeds that have flowers that attract moths, and also ones that provide the host plants for caterpillars. So, for example, one is the white and red campion flower. It's a beautiful wild flower, and moths visit the flowers at night, and it also uses the seed pod to develop its caterpillar.
So are there any books on moths that you'd recommend?
As a matter of fact, we've just brought out a book. It's called Moths, Their Biology, Diversity and Evolution. And it's actually packed with stunning images of some of the most peculiar moths on the planet. And we hope it brings moths into the limelight, because it's usually butterflies that get all the fame. It's not very expensive, and it's a great introduction to all ages, actually.
So, David, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been absolutely fascinating to hear all your stories and to hear your huge enthusiasm for these extraordinary creatures. So all that is left to do is to say thank you so much. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you, bye.
Bye-bye.
Now, as David just mentioned, he's the co-author of a wonderful book all about moths called Moths, Their Biology, Diversity and Evolution.
We've already bought a copy, and it's really fascinating. Although it's not a children's book, there are loads of amazing photos and facts for all ages.
And we're happy to say we have copies to give away to lucky listeners.
To be in with a chance of winning, all you have to do is to email us at rockford@sweetapple.co.uk
with the name of the moth that has a picture on its wings of a red-eyed fly feeding on vomit and bird poo.
Send us your answers in an email, title it Competition, and we'll select 5 random winners.
So go on, send your answers to rockford@sweetapple.co.uk and you could win. Full details are in our story notes.
So that's it for this episode of Stories, Science and Secrets. But don't worry, episode 5 is out now, along with the next thrilling part of Lost on Infinity.
To find out more or to ask us anything about the show, visit RockfordsRockOpera.com. That's RockfordsRockOpera.com.
All these links and more information are in our story notes.
Please do review us on Apple or Spotify. It really helps, and we're so grateful to people who say nice things about us. But for now, it's goodbye from Steve.
Goodbye.
Matthew. Kenny the cat, who I think was outside chasing moths during our interview with David Leese. And from me, Elaine. Goodbye.